Forget Bezos, forget Musk, forget Rockefeller. If you measured wealth not in dollars, but in how much of the world's economy one person actually controlled, none of them come close to the man you're looking at right now. At his peak, this man owned roughly 2% of everything Europe produced. He personally decided who would become the most powerful emperor in the world. He built the first global intelligence network. He funded Magellan. And when he died, he left behind a charity so well designed it's still running, 500 years later, charging its residents less than €1 a year in rent. His name was Jakob Fugger. And the strange thing is, almost nobody remembers him. So how did a family of small-town weavers end up bankrolling the Holy Roman Empire? How did they invent the blueprint for every modern bank, every hedge fund, and every multinational corporation you know today? And maybe the more interesting question, why did they lose it all? Our story starts in 1367. A rural weaver named Hans Fugger walks into the city of Augsburg in what's now southern Germany. The city clerk writes 3 words in the tax register. Fugger advenit. Fugger has arrived. That's it. That's the entire record. Nobody knows a dynasty has just walked through the gate. Augsburg sat right on the trade route between Venice and the booming cities of the north. And Hans figures out something most weavers never did. The real money isn't in making cloth, it's in controlling who makes it. So he starts handing out raw cotton and flax to other weavers on credit, and buys back all the finished fabric. He doesn't weave anymore. He owns the system. He captures the profit margin on every loom in town. Stop being a worker. Start being the layer above the workers. That's the move every future tycoon will copy. Hans dies. His sons take over. And here's where it gets interesting, because the family splits into 2 branches with 2 completely different philosophies. One branch, the Fugger of the Row, lends aggressively to anyone with a title. Kings, princes, nobles, no collateral required. The other branch, the Fugger of the Lily, plays it slower. They only lend when there's real physical collateral backing the loan. For a while, the risky branch looks like it's winning. Then, in 1499, a major borrower refuses to pay them back. And because nothing was secured, they can't take anything in return. The entire branch goes bankrupt, wiped out. The careful branch watches it happen. And they learn a lesson that becomes the iron law of the family for the next century. Never lend to a king unless you're holding something he needs. Quick thing before we go further. If you're into stories that tie the distant past to how our world actually works today, hit the subscribe button and the like button. This channel mixes history with finance, and you're going to want the next one. Okay, back to it. The careful branch has a son. His name is Jakob, born 1459. He was actually supposed to become a priest. That was the plan. But his older brothers die young, and suddenly, Jakob is pulled out of church training and shipped off to Venice. He's 14 years old. Venice at this time is the financial center of the known world. And while he's there, Jakob learns a skill that doesn't sound exciting, but is about to change European history. Double-entry bookkeeping. Every transaction recorded twice, once as a credit, once as a debit. It sounds boring, but here's why it matters. Most merchants in Northern Europe were still keeping books in a single column. Money in, money out. That method hides things. You can run a business for years and have no idea you're losing money until the day the creditors show up. Double entry shows you the truth in real time. Jakob brings this technique home. Then he does something nobody else has thought of. He forces every single Fugger branch office spread across dozens of cities to send him an annual balance sheet. Standardized, audited, consolidated. For the first time in history, a private business can see its own global financial position at a glance. While his competitors are guessing, Jakob knows. He knows exactly how much cash he has in Antwerp, in Rome, in Lisbon. He can lend more aggressively, pull back faster, and spot problems before they become disasters. Every modern bank, from JP Morgan to your local credit union, is still using the system Jakob helped popularize 500 years ago. That's him. Armed with better information than anyone else, Jakob makes his first huge move. In 1487, a prince named Sigismund of Tyrol runs out of money. His lifestyle is too expensive. No bank in Italy will touch him. Jakob says yes, on one condition. The collateral won't be promises or land or titles. The collateral will be the entire output of the silver mines of Schwaz. Just like that, the Fuggers go from being bankers to being the people who own the mines. Then Jakob does it again, this time with copper. He partners with a Hungarian mining engineer named Johann Thurzo. Together, they get their hands on something revolutionary, a new metallurgical process called the Siger process. Here's the trick. A lot of copper ore actually contains tiny amounts of silver trapped inside it. For centuries, nobody could efficiently pull the silver out. The new process uses lead to separate the two metals during smelting. Suddenly, ore that used to be just copper is now copper plus silver. You've just doubled the value of your rocks. But the process needs massive, expensive furnaces. The traditional mining guilds, the workers' associations that had controlled metal production for centuries, they simply can't afford it. The Fuggers can. So they build the furnaces, they buy the mines, they hire the refiners, they own the ships that carry the metal to Antwerp. And from Antwerp, they ship it as far as India. This is vertical integration. Every step of the process, raw material, manufacturing, distribution, owned by one family. The guild system, which had dominated European labor for hundreds of years, gets broken. If that sounds familiar, it should. 350 years later, John D. Rockefeller will do exactly the same thing with oil. Own the wells, own the refineries, own the pipelines, crush the competition. They'll call him a genius. He was running the Fugger playbook. 1519, the Holy Roman Emperor dies, and 7 men, the prince-electors, are about to choose his replacement. There are 2 serious candidates. On one side, King Francis I of France. On the other, a 19-year-old Habsburg named Charles. Whoever wins will rule the largest empire in Europe since Rome. The way you win an imperial election in 1519 is simple. You bribe the electors. More than the other guy. The total price tag comes in at 851,585 guilders. Neither candidate actually has it. Francis borrows from Italian bankers. Charles goes to Jakob Fugger. And Jakob, calmly, deliberately, puts up 543,000 guilders, roughly 2/3 of the entire bribe fund, out of his own pocket, to install a teenager on the throne of Europe. Charles wins. He becomes emperor of a realm so vast that people start saying the sun never set on it. And Jakob? Jakob is so aware of what he just did that he writes Charles a letter to the most powerful man in the world, and he reminds him, in writing, that without Fugger money, there would be no Emperor Charles. Imagine sending that to Napoleon. That is the level of audacity we're talking about. And of course, Jakob didn't do it out of loyalty. He got something in return, the rights to the mercury mines of Almaden in Spain. And mercury, without getting into the chemistry, was absolutely essential for refining silver, especially the massive amounts of silver the Spanish were about to pull out of the New World. So Jakob's loan made him richer, while making the empire that owed him even more dependent on him. This is the invention of a pattern we still see today. When a government needs billions overnight to wage a war, prop up a currency, keep the lights on, who do they call? Investment banks, sovereign lenders, the modern descendants of Jakob Fugger. Now, to run a global operation like this, in an era when the fastest information travels at the speed of a horse or a sailing ship, you need a system. And Jacob built one. It's called the Fugger Zeitungen, the Fugger newsletters. He planted agents and correspondents in every major city: Venice, Rome, Lisbon, Antwerp, Seville, even further. These agents sent him regular, handwritten, confidential reports, not gossip, market data, commodity prices, shipping manifests, political crises, crop failures, military movements, all of it flowing back to one building in Augsburg. While his competitors reacted to news after it became public, Jacob was already moving. Over 16,000 of these letters still survive today. When a hedge fund today pays $30,000 a year for a Bloomberg terminal, they're paying for the exact same thing Jacob figured out half a millennium earlier. Information is money. Faster information is more money. Exclusive information is the most money. Jacob didn't just lend to kings and mine metals. He also funded high-risk, long-shot voyages, the kind with a real chance of ending at the bottom of the ocean. The most famous one? In 1519, he quietly helped finance Ferdinand Magellan's attempt to sail west all the way to the Spice Islands. Magellan didn't make it back. He was killed in the Philippines. Most of the ships sank or were abandoned. Only one, the Victoria, completed the circumnavigation 3 years later. But that one ship came home loaded with cloves. And the cloves were worth so much that the whole expedition, 5 ships, hundreds of dead men, still turned a profit for its investors. That is venture capital, 500 years before Silicon Valley. Fund 10 wild ideas, 9 die. The one that survives pays for everything. Jakob dies in 1525. His nephew Anton takes over and does a solid job for decades. But 3 huge forces slowly grind the empire down. First, sovereign default. The Spanish king, Philip II, inherits the debt Jakob helped create, and then borrows massively more. His empire costs too much to run. His wars never end. So he does what desperate governments always do. He announces 3 separate times that he's simply not paying his debts. Default, default, default. Each time, the Fuggers lose huge sums, and each time, instead of walking away, they lend more, hoping the next payment will arrive. In modern finance, there's a phrase for this: extend and pretend. Keep the loan alive on paper. Pray the borrower survives. Refuse to admit the loss. It doesn't work. The losses compound. Second, the price revolution. Meanwhile, the Spanish are pulling unimaginable amounts of silver out of a mountain in Bolivia called Potosi. That silver floods into Europe, and when you dump that much silver into an economy, the value of silver itself goes down, and the price of everything else goes up. Inflation. The Fuggers' entire empire was built on silver: their mines, their loans, their collateral. As silver becomes cheap, their mines become worthless. Their fixed interest bonds lose real value. The foundation crumbles. Third, a new kind of company appears. In 1602, in Amsterdam, something new is invented: the Joint Stock Company, the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. Here's why it matters. The Fuggers were a family partnership. When a partner died, his heirs could pull their money out. Capital was never fully stable. The VOC solved that. It sold shares to the public. Your money got locked into the company permanently. If you wanted out, you sold your shares to someone else. And on top of that, the VOC introduced limited liability. If the whole thing crashed, you only lost what you put in. That combination is the DNA of every company on every stock exchange today. Apple, Aramco, Samsung, all of them. The Fuggers couldn't compete with that. They were a family. The VOC was a crowd. By 1658, the great Fugger commercial empire formally closes its doors. The bank that chose emperors quietly fades out of history. But there's an epilogue, a beautiful one. Back in 1521, while Jacob was still alive and at the peak of his wealth, he did something that had nothing to do with money. He built a walled neighborhood in Augsburg, 52 small houses, later expanded, and set it aside as housing for the poor. He called it the Fuggerei. The rent he set, back in 1521, was 1 Rhenish guilder per year, plus 3 daily prayers for the Fugger family. That's it. And here's the astonishing part. The Fuggerei is still operating, right now, in 2026. Same neighborhood, same rules. The rent is still fixed at the 1521 level, which in today's money works out to about 88 cents a year, less than €1. People still live there, low-income residents of Augsburg, just like in the 1500s. How has it lasted 500 years? Because the family did something smart. They converted the endowment into forests, real forests, land. The foundation sustainably harvests timber, sells it, and uses the revenue to maintain the houses. It's survived wars, hyperinflation, currency collapses, empires falling, and it just keeps going. Today, we'd call that sustainable investing, ESG. Jakob Fugger was doing it in 1521. So what do we take from all this? The Fuggers didn't just get rich. They invented the pieces. Standardized accounting, information networks, vertical integration, sovereign lending, venture capital, monopoly strategy, the line between finance and politics. Every one of those things is still shaping your life right now. The interest rate on your mortgage, the dollar in your pocket, the company you work for, the fact that information is power. All of it, downstream of choices made in a small German city 500 years ago. And yet, the empire fell. Because even the richest, smartest, best-informed operator in the world can be undone by bad debt, by inflation, and by a newer, better way of organizing capital. That last part, I think that's the real lesson. No financial empire is permanent. The only thing of Jakob still standing today is the charity. If you made it all the way here, genuinely, thank you. That means a lot, especially on a newer channel. If this was worth your time, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which financial dynasty you want covered next. The Medici, the Rothschilds, the Morgans. I'll see you in the next one.